On my way to the inheritance meeting, I crossed paths with a homeless stranger, and that one unexpected encounter changed everything I thought I knew about family, money, and myself. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a coincidence. One of those odd moments life throws at you and expects you to brush off. But looking back, I know now it was a test, one my parents never expected me to pass. The morning of the meeting felt heavier than most. The sky was clear, the kind of bright blue that should have promised optimism. But for me it was just a spotlight on nerves I couldn't quite shake. I dressed carefully, maybe too carefully, standing in front of the mirror longer than I wanted to admit. A navy dress, professional enough for a lawyer's office but still soft around the edges, because I didn't want to look like I was trying too hard. The irony? I was. The inheritance meeting had been looming over me ever since my father passed. Everyone knew his estate was significant, properties, investments, and a lifetime of careful financial maneuvering. What no one knew was who he trusted enough to leave it all to. And if you asked my siblings, I wasn't even in the running. They made that clear. I drove through downtown, fingers drumming the steering wheel, rehearsing possible scenarios. If my name wasn't on the will, fine. I'd survive, I always did. But if it was even a fraction, I knew the war it would ignite. My brother Andrew and sister Melissa had always treated me like the expendable one. The responsible one, yes, but also the disposable one. The one they could count on to babysit, to cover for their messes, to smile politely while they took center stage. The light turned red near the courthouse, and that's when I saw him. A man sitting on the curb, back pressed against a crumbling brick wall, holding a cardboard sign that read simply, "Hungry." He wasn't loud, didn't beg, didn't chase cars like others sometimes did. He just sat there, quiet, almost invisible, except for his eyes. They locked with mine for a second, and something in me paused. His eyes weren't pleading. They were resigned, tired in a way that made me feel small for even complaining about my family's drama. The car behind me honked, snapping me back. The light turned green. I should have driven on, should have kept my focus on the legal storm ahead, but instead I pulled over. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe guilt. Maybe instinct. Maybe something bigger. I got out, walked over, and held out the sandwich I'd packed for myself in case the meeting dragged on. Turkey and cheese, nothing glamorous. He looked at it, then at me, like he was checking if there was a catch. For me, he asked. Yes, I said, suddenly self-conscious. He took it slowly, nodded, and whispered, "Thank you." That was it. No long speech, no story of bad luck. Just gratitude. And yet, as I turned to leave, he added, "Be careful in there. Wolves wear family names too." I froze. I hadn't told him where I was going. Hadn't said a word about inheritance, or family, or anything beyond handing him food. My stomach dropped. "Excuse me?" I asked, my voice sharper than intended. He shook his head, already unwrapping the sandwich. "Nothing. Just be careful." I walked back to my car, unsettled. The meeting was only 2 blocks away, but my thoughts were miles from calm. His words echoed with an eerie accuracy, like he'd read my mind or worse, my future. Wolves wear family names too. When I arrived, the conference room smelled faintly of leather and polished wood, the kind of place meant to intimidate. My siblings were already there, Melissa scrolling her phone like nothing mattered, Andrew leaning back in his chair, smirking as though the will was a formality in his favor. "You're late," Melissa said without looking up. 2 minutes, I replied, taking my seat. The lawyer, a gray-haired man named Whitmore, cleared his throat. "Let's begin." My heart pounded, but beneath it all, I couldn't shake the stranger's warning. And before the day was over, I would understand exactly why. Whitmore adjusted his glasses. A man too used to reading truths that shattered families. He unfolded the first page of the will, with the kind of careful reverence priests reserve for scripture. My late client, Mr. Samuel Whitaker, leaves behind 3 children, Andrew, Melissa, and Claire. My name. Hearing it spoken aloud among theirs sent a ripple down my spine. Andrew smirked. Melissa exhaled dramatically, like it was all beneath her. I folded my hands tightly to keep them from shaking. Whitmore continued. The estate is divided under the condition of responsibility and trust. This is not merely a matter of wealth but of stewardship. Andrew leaned forward. Let's skip the sermon. Just tell us the numbers. A flicker of irritation passed over Whitmore's face, but he read on. To Andrew, my son, I leave the lake house and adjoining land, provided he maintains it in good standing and does not sell within 10 years. Andrew smiled broadly, already imagining himself entertaining friends there. To Melissa, my daughter, I leave the art collection, both domestic and international, provided she donates at least 1 piece every 2 years to a public exhibition. Melissa finally looked up, smugness in her expression. Knew it, she murmured. I braced myself. Here it comes. The moment I'd be dismissed with some small token. A polite nod to my existence. And to Claire, my youngest. Whitmore paused, looking at me over the rim of his glasses. I leave controlling interest in Whitaker Industries, as well as the downtown properties, on the condition she acts as guardian trustee for the charitable foundation established in my name. The room froze. Melissa's phone slipped from her hand, clattering to the table. Andrew actually laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. You've got to be kidding. Her dad left the company to her. Whitmore's voice stayed calm. It is written clearly. Control of Whitaker Industries passes to Claire. Andrew slammed his fist against the table. That's insane. She's done nothing to earn that. I've been handling business with Dad for years. Melissa's eyes darted between me and the lawyer, her voice high-pitched with disbelief. This must be a mistake. He knew I had better judgment. He wouldn't leave the properties to her. But Whitmore only set the papers down firmly. Your father's decision was final. If you contest it, you may do so in court. I sat in silence, my pulse thundering. My father's faith in me was a weight I hadn't expected to carry. Responsibility, not just reward. And yet, the pride was tangled with dread. Because I could feel Andrew and Melissa's hatred sharpening like knives across the table. The meeting adjourned, but no one moved. Finally, Melissa hissed, "This isn't over." As I left the building, their voices still echoing behind me, I noticed someone leaning against the lamppost near the corner. The same man from earlier. The homeless stranger. My steps faltered. He caught my eye, then tipped his head in a slow, knowing way. You, I whispered, walking toward him. How did you know? He smiled faintly. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Something in his tone made me shiver. Who are you? Just someone who's seen how wolves dress themselves, he said. Family names, fine clothes, charming smiles. It's all the same when the hunger underneath is the only thing real. I studied him. His coat was worn thin, his shoes frayed, yet his words carried the authority of someone who knew far too much. Why warn me? I asked. His gaze softened, almost paternal. Because people like you forget that kindness is your sharpest weapon. They'll try to turn it into weakness. Don't let them. Before I could ask more, Andrew stormed out of the building. Phone pressed to his ear, voice venomous. We'll contest it. She's not taking control. Melissa followed, whispering furiously to him. I turned back to the stranger, but he was already gone. Vanished into the city's hum like a shadow that had served its purpose. That night, my phone lit up with messages, threats, manipulations, half-hearted pleas. Andrew demanded meetings. Melissa accused me of betrayal. Each word was dipped in the same poison, resentment that I'd been chosen, that I'd been trusted. And yet, beneath my fear, a spark caught fire. For once, I wasn't the expendable one. I wasn't just the background sibling. I was the heir to more than money. I was the heir to trust, something they never understood. But the days that followed would prove the stranger right. Wolves wear family names. And sometimes, they bite hardest when cornered. The storm broke 2 nights later. I woke to the sound of shattering glass. My heart seized as I stumbled from bed, only to find the study ransacked. Papers thrown everywhere, desk drawers ripped open. The safe my father had trusted me with was pried half open, its steel clawed apart like a wounded animal. My brother's cologne lingered in the air. Andrew. I sank to my knees, trembling. The inheritance wasn't just about money. It carried every record, every plan my father had left for the foundation. Files that could tarnish reputations if twisted, or uplift lives if honored. And now Andrew had taken them. Melissa wasn't far behind. She called me before dawn, her voice sharp as a blade. You think Dad's little charity dream means anything? Andrew and I are going to prove you unfit. Once we're done, the company, the properties, they'll all be ours. I should have argued, should have begged even. But instead, I remembered the stranger's words. Kindness is your sharpest weapon. So I told her calmly, do what you think is right, Melissa. But remember, every wolf eventually exposes its teeth. She hung up with a curse. The days blurred into a battle. Lawyers called, threats mounted, rumors spread. Articles leaked suggesting I was unstable, incapable of leadership. Anonymous emails arrived, warning me to step aside before I was ruined like the rest. Each strike cut deep. But I didn't fall. Because then came the turn. Whitmore summoned me to his office one evening, his expression unreadable. He slid a plain envelope across the table. Your father anticipated resistance, he said softly. Inside were documents, sealed statements, notarized confessions. Proof of Andrew's embezzlement during his so-called help with Dad's business. Evidence of Melissa selling art under the table for years, pocketing the cash. My breath caught. Father hadn't been blind. He'd known exactly who they were. And still he'd chosen me. The weight of that trust burned in my chest. The trial that followed was merciless. Andrew shouted. Melissa wept, both of them painting me as the ungrateful, undeserving child. But when Whitmore presented the papers, their defenses cracked like fragile glass. Gasps filled the courtroom. Melissa's sobs turned to silence. Andrew's rage to stunned disbelief. The judge's gavel echoed like thunder. In accordance with the will, he declared. Control remains with Claire Whitaker. The objections are dismissed. I walked out, trembling but unbroken. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, but their questions blurred. What stayed clear, sharp as sunlight, was the memory of my siblings' faces. The disbelief. The betrayal. The realization that their schemes had only carved their own downfall. That night, exhausted, I wandered back through the city streets, past the same corner where I'd first met him. The stranger was there. As if he'd been waiting. You were right, I whispered. They tried to tear me apart. He tilted his head. And yet you stand. I searched his eyes. Who are you really? Why did you care what happened to me? He smiled, faint and bittersweet. Once I had a family like yours. Once I thought money could make them love me. I lost everything believing that lie. He looked away, voice rough. Sometimes I warn others because I wish someone had warned me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The city moved around us, horns blaring, people rushing, but it felt like the world had narrowed to just that corner, just that truth. Finally, I reached into my bag and pulled out a folded check. The foundation will need men who've lived what others ignore. Take this. Not as charity, as an invitation. His hand trembled as he accepted it. His eyes, once weary, dulled by endless winters, brightened with something I hadn't expected. Hope. He laughed softly, shaking his head. Your father left the company to the right one after all. And then he disappeared once more into the city's pulse, leaving only the echo of his words behind. I stood there, the night air cool against my skin, realization settling like armor. Inheritance was never about wealth. Not houses or art or companies. It was about legacy, trust, responsibility. About standing when wolves circled. About keeping kindness sharp enough to cut through cruelty. And as I walked home, the future no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a beginning. Because my father's trust hadn't just given me power. It had given me the strength to finally see who I was. And who I refused to ever become.